Those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Rieder. I've been blessed to share the stage with people like Les Brown and T. Harv Eker and Robert Kiyosaki and people like that. And today I'm going to be teaching you how to effectively communicate. The value of chiropractic, which is, in a time like now, I can honestly say that potentially the human race had never ever needed us more, or needed us to have the ability or the skill set to reach more people than it does right now. Because there are so many people out there right now that need our message desperately. Right now, that if you are someone in your community that is giving a message of hope, you will naturally attract those people to you that you want to serve. And that's the goal. The goal is to serve more people. So I hope you enjoy it. So I think it's interesting to understand the definition of communication before we continue. The definition of effectively communicating is understanding that communication is a process of an idea or a concept moving across space and being received by another person who is concentrating enough to receive it and then understand the communication. Let me run through that again. The process of communication is the process of an idea or concept going across a distance to a receiver with the intention that it reaches the receiver, and the receiver must be paying attention so that they can understand the communication process happening. One of the things I always like to say is often within chiropractic, we often talk about going back to our roots. And if you do go back to your roots, if you do go back to the roots of chiropractic, and I ask you who pretty much communicated chiropractic better than anyone on the planet who's ever lived, it'd be very hard pressed to find anyone more or any other name to come up besides BJ Palmer. And if you look at the way he communicated and the media with which he communicated, he was way above his time. And some of those processes I'm going to cover today. So I'm going to break down the steps that I've just explained to you right now. And the first step being a process. It's a process of an idea or concept going across distance to the receiver. So let's talk about that. Here's what I want you to understand. If you are communicating anything to anybody, you first, as the communicator, need to be clear on the communication. It's an old saying that says, I believe it was Albert Einstein that said, I don't have time to write you a short letter, so I'm going to write you a long one. Meaning that it's so much easier to vomit stuff onto a page without giving it thought and effectively communicating it so that it's received and understood. It's much easier to just spit it out, and often that long message might not be understood, but it's easier for the communicator to do it. So the process of communication is a step-by-step process. So my advice to you is, whenever you get the opportunity to engage in any type of book or course or lesson to better communicate, grab it with both hands. I know it sounds cheesy, but any book that you can possibly read that helps communication will change your life. It's interesting, Warren Buffett is quoted as saying that the biggest return on investment of any investment he's ever made in his entire life. And you must remember that Warren Buffett, that's all he does for a living, is he measures his return on investment of his investments. But when asked the question, what is the biggest return on investment of any investment you've ever made, his answer might surprise you. What he said was a public speaking course he went to many, many years ago. Now, Warren Buffett is not known, although he does communicate to millions of people because he's kind of famous, but that's not his gig. It's not what he does. He's not an orator as a profession like Tony Robbins, but he still said that changed his life more than anything in the world. And the question is, why did that change his life more than anything? Why did that have the biggest return on investment? And I truly believe that when you are a being that does the work, like you're doing now, to communicate the message, that in itself helps you become more influential. Let me say that again. When you are the being that works on yourself, so that you are the being that wants to work hard on yourself and understanding your own internal dialogue, then and only then will you communicate and reach more people. Again, another mouthful, but I hope it sets up the context for this first point. The first point is great communication always starts with yourself first. There's three things that I say that the most successful docs I've ever worked with on the planet, and I help docs all over the world grow their practices. I also have 8 practices myself, and I've worked with probably more associates than anyone on the planet, I humbly say. What I would say is that the most successful docs I've ever worked with, from a communication standpoint, have these 3 things in abundance. The first thing is they have massive amounts of energy. Remember that you can never influence or the person rather with the most energy will always influence the person with a lower level of energy. And if you are a health practitioner that's wanting to move someone to a higher vibration, you are never going to influence or impact someone's life who has a higher level of energy than you. Remember, let me say that again. If your practice members are coming to you and they are vibrating at a higher level than you, you can have a tough time moving them towards health or higher vibration. So it starts with yourself first. Number one, make sure you've got great energy. It's a funny quote, if you will, but it's worth mentioning now. It's by Stuart Wilde. Stuart Wilde said this. He said the key to success is to raise your own energy levels, and when you do, people will naturally be attracted to you. And when they show up, build them. And it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek joke, but there's a lot of truth in that. And it comes from the perspective that people will pay to watch a burning fire. You need to be burning with fire, first and foremost. From a communication perspective, when you're taught to speak on stage, or when you talk to communicate to small rooms, or when you talk to communicate in any way, shape, or form, they always say that you need to be in the state you want to create. So if you want to move people in the right direction, if you want to move people towards health, most of the communication and all the studies show that most communication is non-verbal. Your body language, your energy levels, how you look after yourself, your state. That's half the communication battle done, is you first and foremost being in the great state. So number one, energy. Number two, there is no great chiropractor I've ever worked with that doesn't have this in abundance, and the word is certainty. When two human beings interact, the human being with the most certainty will always influence or draw magnetically the other human being towards it in some way, shape, or form simply because they've got more certainty. There is something super attractive about someone who's passionate about the thing they do, and specifically that comes from certainty. Now, certainty, within chiropractic, it's both our biggest advantage and it's also our biggest disadvantage at times, is our diversity, to the degree that we have our diversity. I mean, when I talk about diversity, I think there's over 50 to 100 techniques alone, and there's many different practice styles, and you will get a different practice style depending on where you go on the planet. Now that is beautiful about the chiropractic profession, because there's no one way to do it, but that's also confusing at times for the consumer. And when we really dive into certainty, I want to be clear that you have to find your method with which you find certainty. For most people, I always say, Tony Robbins has a saying, it says success leaves clues. And when I was going through my journey, just so you understand, I went to a chiropractic college where we were taught almost no philosophy, where we were taught we weren't very certain at all. In fact, I was so uncertain about what I wanted to do that when I qualified as a chiropractor, I actually wanted to go do a postgraduate medical degree so that I wasn't a chiropractor. I'll never forget, a lecturer looked me in the eye and said, "Don't do it. This is my final year." He said, "Don't do it, it's too hard to make it." That was the messaging that I got and the communication that I got prior to qualifying. So I needed to go find my certainty. So the biggest lesson I want to tell you right now is, first of all, look to the most successful chiropractors on the planet. I remember a good friend of mine stood on stage once and he said, you'd have to be, excuse my language, you'd have to be an idiot not to put two and two together and understand that all the successful chiropractors on the planet all talk about the same thing, do the same thing, think about the same thing, and it always leads back to some type of grounding in the principles of chiropractic. So my advice for you is to embrace that and really surround yourself or go all in on that wherever possible. But make sure you stick around those people with certainty. So find certainty within the thing you do, and certainty leads to awareness, leads to certainty, which leads to influence. There is from a communication standpoint, there is almost telepathic, to get really woo-woo on you, power that people have when they really are so certain in their principles. People can tell. It's like you can tell when someone is efficient at the thing just telepathically, almost just being in their presence. They have their presence, and that's the type of doctor you want to be, because most people are looking for safety and they're looking for security, and by being certain in your principles, by being certain in your technique, being certain in the thing you're doing, that in itself is a form of communication. So that's number two. Number three, without a doubt, I think it's our secret weapon within chiropractic, and we don't use it enough. The secret weapon is this: it's empathy. Empathy. we have energy, we have certainty, and we have empathy. And those three things communicate more than you could ever learn in any skill set on how to communicate with regards to scripts and procedures and techniques. And those things are very important. Those things are very, very important. But I tell you right now that I have worked with some docs who have, in many ways are socially inept, but they are oozing empathy, and they were some of the busiest, most influential docs I've ever worked with in my entire life. I believe the saying is, nobody really cares until you let them know how much you care. So empathy is a massive part of the whole process. Those are my first points with regards to you working on yourself so you can better communicate. Without a doubt, that's the biggest skill set. I mean, I can give you techniques and I give you templates and I give you all those things, but without energy, without certainty, without empathy, it's very difficult to have the impact that we want. And that's the point of this. Communication is about impacting lives, making a difference in your communities. That's the major difference between someone that just is a speaker and someone that's a trainer. You want to be a trainer. You want to help move people towards the truth wherever possible. A little tip on that, they say the truth will set you free, but often first it will agitate you. So as the communicator, be ready for that at times. People aren't always ready to receive the truth. Hey docs, thanks for watching the video. Hopefully you found it helpful. And if you haven't yet checked out one of my free books, New Patient Avalanche, how to get a ton of new patients in your practice, or Practice Growth Speaking Secrets, how to do lunch and learns and corporate talks, and how to get people to come to you for informational talks, click on the link below, grab a book. They're absolutely free. All you do is pay for shipping. I think it's $7.95 or something, and you get all the templates and everything you need and cool bonuses within them to fulfill those things like downloads, etc. Click on the link below, grab one of those books, and I hope it's helpful. See you soon.